obviously an emotional game for a lot of different reasons. It seemed like the defense kind of got things kick-started to turn it around, Jarian's play and a couple other plays. What did you see from those guys, just how they handled the emotions of, getting behind, Jordan getting hurt, and then rallying around each other?
Yeah, before the game, I talked to the defense in our briefing of just, to use all the emotions, really hitting upon the fact that their last time in the Doak for a group of these seniors. And I said it'll be an emotional game like most of them are, but we got to channel the emotion and, use it to our, positive for a way to focus. And never thought it would have, been in that end of the emotions with just how the game started in all facets. But, I was proud, not surprised. It's been one of our strong suits to be able to deal with the ups, the downs, and everything that goes with it. Obviously, that was in a different level with what happened early in that football game. But, just proud of how we responded even, through our emotions throughout, that early part of the game. Nobody planned to draw that thing up the way it went, but, we had a sense just from a football standpoint that we were gonna get a lot of the junk that we got from them, and, it's just, they just happened to execute them all in one drive, and really it came down and we just settled them down in multiple ways, schematically, but as much that emotionally. And I thought our guys did a good job of coming together.
To follow up on that, Adam, what is the messaging in that moment to your group about handling emotions, and even for you, like you're dealing with emotions, I'm sure yourself. So I guess how do you go about handling that and dealing with that?
We're not robots, so you can't compartmentalize, okay, now it's this, let me go into this mode. I think you're trained through it by just how you live your life, and the ups and downs of it all. And, I hate to say you have a job to do because this is still a game for these guys. And, as high of a level that we play and coach at, you just want to be able to get back to who you are. And that comes down after you get a strip sack fumble, and that happens when you lose one of your leaders, or when you go down in a game that you're highly favored. I think you train for that daily, and we live in, a way in this, at this level of football and this level of entertainment that, there's gonna be negativity, there's gonna be high positivity, and you gotta try to live in both of those worlds and still operate the same, which is just a mind on the next step and trying to be better. And easier said than done, but that's how we train every day. And so you're kind of built for those moments, even though you're not prepared for everything that comes, you're prepared how to react to it all.
Essen?
You mentioned the strip sack fumble. Was that just something that you guys just needed on the sideline just to turn things around a little bit, or how much did that help on the sideline?
Yeah, I mean, we called strip sack fumble blitz, and it was great that we executed. We saved them. There's only a certain number you have. Some just happened, but most of them we just call that way. The Clemson one this way. It's just how we operate. But it was. Sometimes in those games, when you're playing those games, those third downs are pretty interesting. You want to kind of, you want to attack, you want to be smart, you want to kind of see how the game's going to play out sometimes. And then, sometimes you just know plays need to be made, and you just make sure you put your guys in the best position. But then they got to go out and do it. And, it was actually a screen set up. They had a screen set, and our guys did a good job of covering it, so it gave J-Dub the ability to get there a little bit longer extended play, but he made the most of it. Anytime you can get a sack, create the takeaway, but also get on the ball, that was a big time play by him.
Aslan?
Coach, I think you kind of have like a unique perspective on this, being a defensive coach and seeing what happened to Jordan. I guess some people characterize that tackle as one of those hip drop tackles, and that's something that's been talked about in a lot of football circles as being a play that should be outlawed or looked at. Being a guy that's coaching defense and trying to get guys onto the field, obviously to tackle them. I mean, what are your thoughts on that play specifically, and how do you guys go about it? We don't see you, I don't think, coaching that play. How do you guys go about it?
Yeah, I don't know if we've had that situation here on our side of the ball in the 4 years I've been here. I'm all for this is the greatest game in the world. because of the physicality of it, because of the response necessary, because of the amount of people on the field, the speed that it's played. But I'm all for making the game as safe as possible. No coach, no player wants to see injuries happen during a game. And how do we keep the integrity of this great game of the physicality, the speed, but also make it safe? And I'm kind of aligned in the party of, I want to be forward thinking in how we can do that. Because no matter what rules you play, there's still going to be physicality in this football game. It's about moving people back and forth, the space created, the space taken away. And, I don't have all the answers to how you fix all the injuries, but I am a big advocate of making this game as safe as it can be, within reason of how you do the rules.
Corey?
So you were all set up to play a guy that had started 1 million games, and now you're playing a guy that I think I just looked it up, has thrown 8 passes in his college career, has run 12 times, or vice versa. So he's been on the field very few times. How do you go about game planning for him? Do you go back to like his huddle film from high school? Would you even think to do that, or is it more about game planning for the Florida offense? And do you expect it to change now that they've got, I guess, probably a more athletic guy behind center?
Yes, very, very much so. The 3rd and 3 keeper for 20+ yards got my attention really quick. But when you're a backup quarterback, say, at this level, you've got skill set. Maybe sometimes you just need an opportunity, right? Sometimes coaches play the guys they think are best, but sometimes it takes an injury, or sometimes it takes somebody not playing well for that person to get the opportunity. And you really don't know how they're going to respond. We will go back, and we've done that. We'll look back at transfers, previous schools. We'll look at redshirt freshmen. We'll look at their high school film, because the traits of the player are still the traits of the player. Now, how they perform those traits within the scheme, within the environment they're put in, that's the uncalculated, thing that you got to kind of measure. But these guys have had a lot of success running the football. They got 2 really talented receivers. Their head coach is the play caller, so he's been doing it for a number of years. So you take all that into account of how much will change, and that's all part of just game planning for this week.
Kurt?
I know he's not on your side of the ball, but you probably have a unique perspective going up against Tate in practice the last few years. I'm just curious, I guess, for your impression of how far he's come and just the progress he's made. Really, it's been more obviously on the practice field than on in games.
Yeah, Tate's a valuable member of our team, and he's always been one of the better athletes. You see him just playing catch, running around. He's on our hands team. Outside of the quarterback play, he's as athletic, and he's got good speed, long, got good hands. But I will tell you this, when his number's been called, he's been prepared. And whether that was in the backup role the last couple of years, and when he's got the opportunity, he's gone in there and he's done the job. We have all the confidence in the world in Tate.
All right.
Coach Norvell was talking about Florida's receivers, and obviously Pearsall had a really nice game last year here. Bernardo didn't look like he was available later in that game. How's that group looking? And if you could also talk about Azareye'h and how he's played the last month or so.
Yeah, I really feel like we've had 3 starting corners throughout the year. Obviously, Fentrell and Bernardo have been starting the majority, but there's been games where AZ has gotten more playing time than the others. Just guys go down and other guys step up. Having the ability to have J-Dub have been playing nickel and corner. Greedy's given us valuable time. We've used Kevin Knowles in there at nickel, which allows us to move some guys out. So this is why you build that depth, and you never, hopefully everybody's available. We'll plan for that to be accordingly with Bernardo. But if not, or if somebody else goes down, we're prepared for those moments. And so, I think Azareye'h gave us really good snaps. And, if he's out there at corner more times, then there's probably just more plays we made by him. They do have some talented wideouts, and Pearsall had a really good first half against us. It's important that we know where he is and do a good job with him.
Essen?
Patrick Payton, probably not getting the sacks he wants early in the season, but has 9 batted balls, 2 in the last game. What has he done so well to, even if he's not getting to the quarterback, impacting the pass game?
Pat's really intelligent. And, just, he plays to the throwing side hand a lot, just on how we line him up. And, we're trying to get as many sacks and pressures with him as we can. He just has a really good sense of timing and pace of play. You see some defensive linemen that just, all they see is the 6 inches in front of them, which is important too. Pat kind of sees through blockers and can anticipate throw lanes, can anticipate, and it helps that, obviously he's 6'5" with really long arms. And, he's got a great feel for football, and I think that shows up on that. It was funny, early in the year, he asked me what the record for most pass breakups for a defensive lineman or I didn't quite have the answer. I just said, keep doing it, and I'll let you know at the end of the year.
Anything else?
Do you get the answer now or no?
No, sir.
At the end of the year.